is better than 1,000 away from you. Please stand, if you're able, for How Lovely, Lord, How Lovely, which is in your Book of Praise, number 53. Welcome. Good morning to everyone here this morning, and happy anniversary. It is a day to celebrate how God has guided Trinity over these years and how God will lead our growth in our community from today forward. We're so thankful that Reverend Jack Archibald is joining us today to help mark the occasion. Welcome back, Jack. And welcome to those of you who have ventured to our church building and to those who are watching on Zoom. We are glad you have come. The search committee is consolidating the church's profile now, which is an integral part of setting out who we are, so that we then plan to advertise sometime in 2022 for our new minister. I know many of you were interested in the process, and please contact our chairperson, Jennifer, who will be happy to answer any of your questions. Marilyn O'Brien continues to provide our grocery cards to us as a way of fundraising for our church, and we thank her for that. Tonight is the deadline to order any amount from any grocery store that your heart desires. So simply email Marilyn. Pickup is on Thursday afternoon here at the church building. Mark your calendars for December 12th for the next order. We would hate for you to go hungry over Christmas. Debbie?
So as some of you know, our former Minister of Discipleship and Youth, Jessica, has been experiencing many medical issues. It's been going on for almost 3 years. When we went on Zoom, some of those issues were beginning to be managed, and Jessica wanted to contribute, so she was editing our videos, our services, so we could put them up on the website. Since this past August, Jess has been experiencing some setbacks with the current medical conditions and has had new conditions presented themselves. So because of this, the editing of the services has fallen way behind. Guy Delbeck is helping us now trying to catch up. And Jessica still wants to contribute doing some of the editing, but we're asking for help. If you or you know of someone, doesn't even have to be coming to Trinity, just maybe grandchild, something, who have some video editing software, and basically all they need to do is cut the beginning and the end off the Zoom service and replace the song files inside the video so that they're a little bit cleaner and we don't have to worry about any Zoom issues with those. We would really appreciate the person coming forward. We're hoping for 3 or 4 people to help out with this so that we can make the services available much quicker after Sunday morning and we can put them up on the website. This will relieve some pressure on Jess when she's able to resume editing full-time or whatever. She will still not have to do every week, and no one person would be responsible for the editing so that we have some backup. Again, if you know of someone, if you yourself have, you like to play with the video editing software or whatever, please let me know. And there will be an announcement going out on email, so you'll get my email address there. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie, for all you do, and also thanks to Jessica for all she has done. And we are praying for her to get better. Exciting news, the monthly seniors lunches are back. Thanks to Diana McCormick. She will soon let you know when the first after church event will occur. The pastoral care team will gather for a meeting and potluck Christmas dinner on the 13th of December. Before then, we plan to create little cookie boxes for those more isolated members of Trinity that we will deliver. If you would like to suggest names for this little mission project, please contact me. Well, the Hollyberry Bazaar was a great success. I hope most of you got to see what this beautiful sanctuary looked like yesterday. It was like a fairyland. It was gorgeous. And I'd like to personally thank all the women and men who bravely made it happen this year. Thanks to all who supported it and came out and purchased and bought. This space was just dazzling. And that was before our Christmas tree was erected. Thank you also for those volunteers who came out yesterday afternoon to put up and then decorate the Christmas tree. The best part of yesterday for me was the fellowship that occurred, people meeting people for the first time since COVID, and it was truly an exceptional time. We all enjoyed it. At the back, in the coffee area, you will see a number of baskets, gift baskets that didn't sell yesterday. Please have a look at them and consider buying one for a special person in your life for Christmas. Marg Connolly will be happy to take your money. Financially, the bazaar was a big success also. So please keep in mind the fundraising mission projects that Trinity has ongoing. We want to continue to support the hospice, and we've had a special fundraising going on for it. Thank you to those who have already contributed to hospice. There's still an opportunity to do that. Also, another couple of the missions that we have ongoing would be the Kananaskisco Refugee Support Group and Gracefield Camp. In our weekly newsletter, Jennifer advertised that poinsettias are available to purchase for Gracefield. So that's something that can be done this week. Consider these worthy charities for an extra offering this Christmas. We would like your prayer requests to be put into the chat area if you're watching on Zoom. And for those of you here, we have a prayer book that we're hoping that you're putting your prayer requests in as you come into the sanctuary. Our prayer team continues to pray during the week for all of these names that are placed in the book. Thank you to Jean Gallant for that. Now I'll ask you to stand for the call to worship. From Psalm 63 in the Message. Oh God, you are my God. I can't get enough of you. I've worked up such hunger and thirst for God, traveling across dry and weary deserts. So here I am now in the place of worship, eyes upon, eyes open, drinking in your strength and glory. Let us worship him. Let us pray. Dear God, we come to you this morning full of gratitude and love. We thank you for 44 years of holding you high in this place. You are a faithful God. Today we ask that by your Spirit that you should show yourself to each person here. We know that our response to you has been intermittent at best, and yet we know that you are ever present with us. May our time together remind us of why we, Trinity, are in this community. Help us to tell others about your wonders and your saving grace through your Son, Jesus. Amen. All right, we're going to have one more song. You can remain standing or you can sit, whatever you're most comfortable. Have you ever felt in such turmoil that you didn't know where to turn? Probably sometime this week that has happened for you. The answer is God. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. You are my lighthouse.
In my wrestling and in my doubts, in my failures, you won't walk out. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Whoa, you are the peace in my troubled sea. In the silence you won't let go. In the questions your truth will hold. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Whoa, you are the peace in my troubled sea. My lighthouse, shining in the darkness, I will follow you. Oh, my lighthouse, I will trust the promise. You will carry me safe to shore, safe to shore, safe to shore, safe to shore. I won't fear what tomorrow brings. With each morning I'll rise and sing. My God's love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Whoa, you are the peace in my troubled sea. My lighthouse, shining in the darkness, I will follow you. Oh, my lighthouse, I will trust the promise. You will carry me safe to shore, safe to shore, safe to shore, safe to shore.
So good morning, those of you who are here in the sanctuary and everyone at home, and a special greeting to the children. None here in the church, but I'm hopeful that there are some at home watching, and certainly this is a moment when we all become children at heart, at least. And on this very special Sunday, the 44th anniversary of the existence of Trinity Church, I want to give us a moment or so to think about those years and how things have changed over that time. Now, the kids may not really realize how things have changed with time, but I've got something here to kind of show how, in fact, time does indeed make a difference to what we will sometimes just take for granted. Now, I have in this bag 38 books. There are 38 books in here. I'll take out one book to show you, first of all. Now, this book, you might be able to see at home and here that it looks like a pretty old book. And in fact, it is an old book. This book was published in the year 1660. 1660, that's a long, long time ago. 300 years. That's even older than this church, and older than us, older than your mommy and daddy, and older than your grandparents. But it's a book that has been around for a long time, and for many, many years, all books were made just like this. Now, I'm going to take out the 37 other books that I have in my bag. And here they are. Anybody know what this is? This is a Kindle. And I have 37 books. And boy, that's a lot handier to carry 37 books in this than it would in the old style. So things change. And very, very much in ways that we might not even recognize. But you know, there's some things that never change. This book that I showed you, it is not a Bible, but it's a book about the Bible. And it speaks a message that was true way back in 1660, and it's still true today, over 300 years later. And in my Kindle, I have a lot of books that talk about the Bible, and they say just about the same things as this old book did. Now, we talk about celebrating 44 years here at Trinity Church. And there have been some very dramatic changes over those years. Even the building and the location has changed. We're in a place where a few years ago, it didn't even exist. But once again, there is something that always has remained the same through all of the years that Trinity Church has been here. And that is the message of God's love and the grace that came in Jesus Christ and that still speaks to us today. However old we may be, and however much longer we may be around, that message is still the same and still so very important to every one of us and to the world around us. Let's pray together. Our gracious God and Father, we thank you that through all the things that change, you never do change. Your love is constant. Your care for us is in fact without end. We pray that you will help our children to know that love that is unchanging and unending, and help us as a church family in celebrating this anniversary. Look forward to years in the future when our children will grow in that love and become part of this congregation as grown-ups even, and know the truth of your mercy, your grace, and your love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
This morning's scripture lesson is taken out of the book of Luke, speaking of one of the books, chapter 5, verses 17 to 26. And the version I'll be reading is from the New Revised Standard Version. This is one of Jesus' early miracles. but I think it's the first one where he is challenged, and his response is one that we should all think of how we would respond when we're challenged. Anyway, let's have a word of prayer first. Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for the lessons that you give us. Each and every day we should be reading your Bible and be taking those lessons to heart. And this is a lesson this morning on how to respond to a challenge when you are being challenged. You responded in such a positive way, in such a way that was telling and spoke to so many people. Thank you, Lord. Amen. Luke 5:17-26. One day while he was teaching, Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting nearby. They had come from every village of Galilee and Judea and from Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was with them to heal. Just then, some men came carrying a paralyzed man on a bed. They were trying to bring him in and lay him before Jesus. But finding no way to bring him in because of the crowd, they went up on the roof and let him down with his bed through the tiles into the middle of the crowd in front of Jesus. When he saw their faith, he said, "Friends, your sins are forgiven you." Then the scribes and Pharisees began to question, "Who is this who is speaking blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" When Jesus received their questionings, he answered them, "Why do you raise such questions in your hearts? Which is easier to say, 'Your sins are forgiven you,' or to say, 'Stand up and walk'? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins," he said to the one who was paralyzed, "I say to you, stand up and take your bed and go to your home." Immediately, he stood up before them, took what he had been lying on, and went to his home, glorifying God. Amazement seized all of them, and they glorified God and were filled with awe, saying, "We have seen strange things today." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thank you very much, Brian. So we have had a 2-week series related to the anniversary, last week and now this week. The title that I have given to the series is An Anniversary Crossroads. And I've been thinking in terms of the fact that this church is between ministers. As you've heard this morning, it sounds like the search for a new pastor is going to begin in earnest now. And you have choices to make. You have come to a point in your history where you are indeed at a crossroads, and you need to choose what direction you are going to take. And that is going to have a lot to do with the person that you call to be your next minister. Now, last week, we talked about how the challenge comes to us as Christ calls us to discipleship in a dramatic and a radical way, as he did with Simon, you remember. Remember how Jesus put Simon on the spot. Simon and his friends had been out fishing all night long. They had caught nothing, but Jesus said to Simon, "Put out in the boat a little. I want you to go into the deep, put down your nets, and catch some fish." Well, the fact is that Simon, the seasoned fisherman, had already been out all night fishing, and there were no fish there. Plus, you don't fish out in the deep water, you fish in the shallows of Galilee. And you don't fish during the day, you fish at night. So everything that Jesus said to Simon seemed to be all wrong. And he was challenging Simon at that moment. He gave the call to Simon, and the question is, would Simon respond? Well, as we saw, Simon had what we would call the right stuff. He said, I've been doing this in this way up until now, but because you asked me to, I am going to do what you have called me to do. And so that was the beginning of Simon's great adventure of discipleship. And that was our focus last week, that this congregation could be what Peter Newman spoke about in his story of the Hudson's Bay Company when he was writing about the voyageurs. They were a company of adventurers. And that's what this church can be. As we look to the future, depending on what you decide as you call your next minister, you can be that company of adventurers in spiritual terms. Well, this week, I don't know if you have seen my sermon title, but I think we'd say it's a little provocative. It's of turkeys and eagles. Of turkeys and eagles. Now, I need to tell you that I am something of an expert when it comes to turkeys. And I'll tell you that expertise has come from my experience in ministry. Now, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. But many years ago, at the beginning of my ministry, a girl in my congregation asked if I would officiate at her wedding. And I said, well, of course I will do that. And then she told me, I don't want to be married here. I would like the wedding to be at my home church in Valcartier, Quebec. And I was glad to do that. And when I got to Valcartier, what I learned was that was a community in which one of the largest centers for growing turkeys was. It's a major farming community dedicated to raising turkeys. And the reason is that the soil there is sandy and dry. Even with the rain, the water soaks away. And so the turkey's feet will not rot as they would were the soil too damp. But anyway, to my point, I was booked to stay with this young lady's uncle, who was one of the main turkey farmers in Valcartier. And every morning that I was there, I went out with him as he went around and checked on the turkeys. He had thousands of them, from when they just break out of the shell till, well, when they're almost ready to arrive on your Christmas table. And it was a fascinating time to spend, and I learned some things about turkeys over those days. The first thing is, of course, turkeys look like no other bird. The second thing is that turkeys are pretty stupid. And the third is that turkeys can be very stubborn. And turkeys also have an interesting habit. If one of their number should look different from all the rest in some way, maybe a couple of feathers that are discolored, maybe some odd shape that it would have, or if they become weak, or if a turkey gets ill, or something shows a problem, all the rest of the turkeys attack it. And they peck it and peck it and peck it until they kill it. I came to understand in those few days why sometimes people talk of other people as turkeys. But another interesting thing from that weekend, Valcartier is in a valley surrounded by beautiful wooded hillsides. And in those hills, there reside eagles. And during the day, as I was around the farm, I would look up in the sky and see these eagles gliding on the wind. I'd see them soaring and diving to pick up their prey and fly back to their nest in the woods. You know, I thought, I wonder if a turkey ever looks up in the sky and says, wow, how did they do that? Because they are so different, so rooted to the ground. And as I saw those eagles, I thought of that passage from Isaiah 40. Those who hope in the Lord will soar on wings like eagles. You see, there are spiritual eagles as well. And that's what I want to focus on today. I want to talk about this congregation becoming like a group of spiritual eagles. Do you know what they call a group of eagles? Well, just if you look out there, I saw this morning, there is a gaggle of geese. And I'm sure you've all heard of a murder of crows. But the name that they give to a group of eagles is a convocation of eagles. Isn't that a great title? A convocation. There's a dignity to that. We think of a convocation where men and women wear black gowns and tasseled caps, and they come together for a solemn occasion of graduation from university. Our Anglican friends actually have what they call a convocation of bishops, where they come together to settle solemn spiritual business for their church. And it's kind of appropriate as we think of spiritual eagles as a convocation. By the way, you know what they call turkeys as a group? A gang of turkeys. And so the question becomes, are we a gang of turkeys or a convocation of spiritual eagles? Well, this passage will help us to see. We'll see the difference between the two. But first of all, at the opening of the passage, we meet what we might call religious turkeys. As Brian read, one day while he was teaching, Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting nearby. They come from every village of Galilee and Judea and from Jerusalem to see what Jesus was doing. They hadn't come to worship him, to admire, to express gratitude. They come to look at it, investigate, and find out what is going on here and realize that they needed to eliminate this guy from their population because of the influence that he is having. But there was another group, and these were the spiritual eagles. Just then, some men came carrying a paralyzed man on a bed. They were trying to bring him in and lay him before Jesus. Now, Mark tells us that there were 4 men, and they had come in order to have this person healed by Jesus. We find in this, guys, the characteristics, if you like, of spiritual eagles. There are 4 qualities that we want to consider. And the first is, to be a spiritual eagle, you need to have a firm conviction. That is a faith in Jesus Christ, who he is, and why he came, and what he can do. These men, we don't know where they came from. We certainly don't know who they are. But probably at some point they had been in the crowd and heard Jesus teaching. Maybe they saw him healing someone who was sick. They could have themselves felt ministry from Jesus. But anyway, the point is that they have brought this man to Jesus because they have a faith in him. They may not know at this point altogether that he is the Son of God, that he is the Creator incarnate, but they know from what they have seen and heard that he has a special relationship with God, and they know that he has a power about him, an ability to heal, and that he is willing to use that power in his grace. And that's why they brought this man to him. A firm conviction of who Jesus Christ is, the power that he has, and his willingness to use it in love. And this, of course, is the foundation of every church. This is what the church is all about. Why would there be a church if those who were part of it did not have this firm conviction in the person of Jesus Christ and the grace that he brings and that he wants to show? And we could go back to the beginning, the first days in the history of this congregation. 44 years ago, as the city of Canada was growing, and there was a sense that there needed to be a place where people could meet and know and receive the grace of Jesus Christ. They had this conviction in their minds and hearts. And now here we find ourselves in a new place. And the city is building out toward where you are now. And as people drive by on Richardson Side Road, and this is very significant, what they see is not just a building here, but at the center there is a tower, and from the top of the tower there is a cross. And what the cross is saying is that there are within this building those with a conviction of who Jesus Christ is and what he can offer. And if you come here, you can meet him too and find his grace. That's the quality that we find in those who are spiritual eagles. At the root of it all is this conviction about Jesus Christ. The second characteristic we see, of course, is that there is Christ-like compassion in a spiritual evil. This is why these men came to Jesus, because they had compassion. We, again, don't know anything about the man who was paralyzed. Maybe he was just a member of the community that they had gotten to know and felt compassion for. Perhaps he was a friend from long ago who had suffered an accident. Perhaps a member of one of their families. But they felt compassion for him, and out of their compassion, they brought him to Jesus because they knew that there was healing for him. And this, too, is what this church has been placed here for. That there should be compassion felt and expressed within the community and beyond. And we have the pattern not only of these men, we also see the example of Jesus Christ himself. You remember at the beginning of his ministry, a very significant point came when he was walking down the road and the leper leaped out at him. And he threw himself at Jesus' feet. And when Jesus saw him, it says he was filled with compassion. And he reached out and he touched him. And that's the significance of this miracle. It's not so much in the healing, but he was ready to cross that social barrier that stood between the healthy and the leprous. And how long had it been since that man had felt a human touch? And Jesus touched him and healed him. And there you see is the example for the church. Once again, it's significant at the very beginning of the church's life that Peter and John were leaving the temple, or going to the temple one day at the hour of prayer, and they found outside a man who was paralyzed and lying there, and people had gone by, past him, perhaps threw him a couple of coins, but could do nothing for him. And beyond that, and he asked for something. And Peter said, "We have no silver or gold, but what we do have, we give to you." And he reached out and healed the man. The pattern of the church. The call upon the church. But this is why we are here. Those of us who believe in the person of Christ, the grace that he offers, his willingness to show it, and we, out of compassion for the world around us, are prepared to bring others to him to find that compassion that he wants to show. So, strong conviction, Christ-like compassion. But the third quality that these guys showed was an unwavering determination. They were going to get this man to Jesus, however hard that may appear to be. You see, they came and they carried him on a bed, a stretcher, and the place where Jesus was jam-packed. They couldn't get in. They could very well have said, oh, well, we tried. Let's go home. Maybe another time we'll be able to do this. They could have said, well, we'll wait till the end of the day and try to get Jesus' attention. The thing is that Jesus at the end of the day would be weary, may not be able to be with them. Or they could have said, we'll come back another time. But Jesus, an itinerant preacher at that time, would not be there. And so they were determined to get this man the help that he needed. And how well we know that in the Christian life and in the work of the ministry of the church, you need to be determined if the work will be done. And once again, the example is in the person of Jesus himself. As he began his ministry that his Father had called him to and a mission to accomplish, the first thing was, of course, he was tempted to give it up at that point. As Satan offered him everything that he could possibly want. Why go through this? Why spend that time? Why suffer as you do? But Jesus was determined to embark on his mission. And so he did. And what did he meet? He met rejection and persecution and finally prosecution. And there before him was the cross. And it brought him to that place where even the Lord himself threw himself down on the ground and said, Father, if it is your will, take this cup from me. But nevertheless, your will be done. And he got up on his feet and he walked straight to the cross. A determination in Jesus' ministry. And so we could look at the history of the church. The kind of obstacles that have been met from the outside and from within. The challenges that have been there. And let me again come back to Trinity Church. We could probably go back to when this began 44 years ago and even more, and the idea of a church being planted was given, and how much came up that stood in the way, and what kind of obstacles there were, and how people could become so easily discouraged. And I do know something of the history of this building. And there were some difficult times in that, wasn't there? As the plans were made, as it seemed that the whole thing could collapse at any point before the building even appeared. But determination is what made the difference. And that's what these men showed. And that's a quality and a spiritual eagle you do not give up. Because of your confidence in Christ, your compassion for the world. And one more quality, as we see in these men, a sanctified imagination. Sanctified imagination, creative solutions. Now, I'd like us to use our sanctified imagination just for a moment and paint a little scene here involving these four men and their friend. It's my idea, so don't look for it in Scripture. But let's think for a moment. As they said, we can't get there, but we're determined to do it. what can we do? What should we do? And if you don't mind, I'll assume they have a little prayer meeting. Ask the Lord for a way in. What could we do? And then one of the guys said, you know, fellas, I've spent a lot of time in my life building homes and constructing roofs. And I think if I could build a roof, I could probably take one apart. Why don't we try this? And then he described the scheme. And so the guy said, that's a great idea. And they went about, they scrounged up some ropes and they got a ladder and they climbed to the top. And then, sure enough, they started to dig through the roof. Now, let me ask you this. What do you think their attitude was as they did this? Do you think they were like those dour Scotch Presbyterian elders and the grim and getting the work done? You know what I think? I think as they did it, they were excited and they were laughing and they thought, what a great idea. And people would say to them, hey, nobody's ever done that before. And they said, well, we're doing it now. And the excitement and the joy that was part of that because they used their imagination. And we think of that creativity and how it works. And let me go to the gospel itself. You know, God had a real conundrum. God, as we know, loves us. But God also is holy. And he can have no relationship with sin. So the problem is, how is he able to embrace us in his love and still deal with the sin where he can have no part? And this is what he came up with. It's the gospel. That he sent his son into the world, who was able to live such a life that at the end he could offer that as a sacrifice for our sin and reconcile us to God. Who'd have thunk it? Absolutely beyond our ideas. God's imagination, as it were. And look at how he came. And this, of course, we'll begin to celebrate next week. We see the nativity scene at the front, that he came in the person of a tiny infant at the bottom of the social ladder. The King of creation humbled himself that much to redeem us. And so, as you look in the Bible, and you study the New Testament, and you see the church unfolding, time and again, there is a creative way by which the gospel moves forward. We see it in the book of Acts and the letters of Paul and Peter and John. And today, more than ever, we need to be creative. We need to use our imagination as we consider how we are going to continue our ministry in these days of rapid change. We have a tendency as Presbyterians sometimes to hold on to our traditions, to do things the way they did it a generation ago. The difficulty with that is we're out of touch with the society around us. And we need to be creative. We have to find new ways to reach them. I read a book not too long ago that suggested that the church is going to take probably at least 100 years to regain its footing in relating to the world around us. And there are all kinds of experimental ministries that are going on right now that are reaching out around our community and beyond. And what the invitation is to us is to see how we can maintain our identity, but still be able to reach a new generation. Sometimes that makes us uncomfortable. But these guys, I think, give us the example to say, look, you could do it. You may have never done it before, but you know there is joy in doing something new and different and finding ways to fulfill our calling for the next 44 years and beyond. And so, spiritual eagles, a whole convocation of them, that's what we are called to be. Now, I know that there are religious turkeys to address. And I hate to say I have no time for turkeys. So let me just very quickly speak about that group that was also present that day. And we asked, did they have any convictions similar to these four men? Well, the answer is yes and no. They had convictions, but their convictions were related not to a God who is full of grace and who is creative in how he reaches out. They had put God in a box, and they could only see God through their traditions and doctrines, and they were not ready to change or do things differently than their forefathers had done. Even though, as we look at the Old Testament, we can see time and again God using creative ways to minister and to provide for the people of Israel. Two of the most significant words that we find in the Old Testament, two words with three letters each. But God. The people of Israel, the Pharisees and Sadducees and the leaders, they had plans. They wanted to do something a certain way. And then it tells us, but God did something very different from what they were expecting. And that is what they did not hear. And that's what made them spiritual turkeys. They refused to change. And they missed the grace of Christ. Well, the second question is, did they have compassion? And there the answer is no. They looked at people suffering around them and they said, well, they have sinned or their parents have sinned. Or they said, those people over there, they are in trouble, but it's their own fault. They're responsible for it themselves. They got themselves into that fix. They can look after it themselves. What if Jesus had said that as he came? But Jesus reached out in his compassion even to those who, humanly speaking, were responsible for where they were. But religious turkeys don't see it that way. They prefer judgment to compassion. They prefer to stand back rather than get engaged with those who need the grace and the mercy of Christ. Determination? Well, yes, determination they would have. They are not going to budge 1 inch. And let me bring that into the present day, because there are some in some churches, and they are absolutely determined not to allow things to go out of their control. They're not going to give up what they have held on to so long and feel so precious. And so the church may begin to empty, and people will go to other congregations and receive other ministries. And these people will stand firm and strong, and they'll turn off the light and lock the door because everybody else is gone. And they'll say, well, we showed them we wouldn't change. The church dies because of their determination. And then, of course, we wonder too about imagination. There is no imagination. This is the way it has been, this is the way it is, and this is the way it always will be. And don't ask us to step outside our comfort zone. We are not prepared to do that. Lacking all imagination, they stay where they were. And like the real turkeys, they cannot fly. They cannot ride on eagle's wings as the spiritual eagles do. And so here you are. You are at a crossroads. Pretty soon you're going to be looking for the person who will lead you into the next ministry, into the next who knows how many years. What a great thing it will be if the person who comes finds here convocation of spiritual evils. Let's pray. And so, our Father and our God, we give you thanks for your grace, for how we find that in so many unusual ways. And so, as you have called us to follow you in faith, to minister the gospel of Jesus Christ in new and different ways, we pray that we may be ready to fly, to follow, to soar. We give you thanks for this congregation, for 44 years of history, for the blessings that you have brought to them. We remember those who founded this congregation, those who have lived and served within it for these decades, and we give you thanks. We thank you for the leadership of ministers and elders. We are grateful for this location at such a critical place in the history of the community and in our nation, and geographically in a growing area. We pray, O God, that you will guide and direct in the time ahead. We pray, Father, for the future. While we are unaware of what is to come, we trust you who know all things. We surrender ourselves again to you. We pray for those in special need within this congregation, those who are ill, those who are discouraged by the times, those who are finding their faith not what it once was, those who in fact have perhaps given up hope. Lord, we pray for the search team. We pray for the city where we find ourselves, especially during this COVID-19 crisis, those who care for the ill, the doctors, the other medical staff, those responsible for support. We pray too, O God, for those who govern at the local level, provincial and national. And we commit all these things into your hands, knowing that you are indeed the God of all grace. We come to you in the spirit of obedience, but especially in faith, in compassion, with discipline, and the imagination to watch you at work among us and through us. And so we ask, Lord, that you will hear us now as we offer in song the prayer that
Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever.
And now I'm going to invite you to join us as we sing our final hymn. And this is a hymn that is in the New Book of Praise, a contemporary hymn, one with a very special application, I think, today. So I'm going to ask you to join with me in singing this, Here I Am, Lord.
By the Lord of sea and sky, I have heard my people cry, all who dwell in dark and sin, my hand will save. I will make the stars of night, I will make their darkness bright, who will bear my light to them, whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. By the Lord of snow and rain, I have borne my people's pain. I have wept for love of them, they turn away. I will break their hearts of stone, give them hearts for love alone. I will speak my word to them, whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. By the Lord of wind and flame, I will tend the poor and lame. I will set a feast for them, my hand will save. By this bread I will provide, till their hearts be satisfied. I will give my life to them, whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart.
And now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Amen.